quick question for you. Have you ever felt outmatched? Outmatched. Like, where are we going with this? You ever felt outmatched? A couple of years ago, my wife and I, we were getting back from a date night, and we got home, and we're going to let the dog out. And so I went to the bedroom to go change, and like my wife, she's going to let the dog out, and out of nowhere, I hear this scream at the top of her lungs. She's yelling, Chris, get out here. And I'm freaking out in the middle of changing, tripping over myself. I run out to the backyard. Run out to the backyard to see that our dog, Balto, we named him Balto after the cartoon movie Balto, big husky dog, okay? If you haven't seen the movie, the name Balto makes absolutely no sense to you, but Balto was our dog's name. And so I see there's this raccoon he has cornered in the corner of this fence. The raccoon is posted up on his two back legs, claws out, just looks mad as all get out. Superman. I'm like, this isn't going to end well here. He's about to jump on my dog's face. And so he jumps on my dog's face, and I'm flipping out. My wife is flipping out. And this is a big moment because this is before kids. So you know, if you don't have kids and you have a dog, like that dog is your kid, okay? Like you know who you are in the audience. You love that dog like a kid. And so we're like, oh no, Holly's like, my baby, and so I'm like, what do I do in this moment? And I do what any good, strong man who wants to protect his house would do. I'm looking for the nearest weapon, right? To which I see a shovel up against the fence. And so I decided, like, this is going to be my weapon of choice. Like, let's go. I run over there. I get the shovel. And then I'm thinking, like, okay, I got the shovel, but, like, how's this going to work out? Like, how do I deal with this situation and still, like, have my dog in the end, okay? Like, and so I'm like, I'm trying to pry this raccoon with this shovel off my dog's face, and it's not working so well. And then finally, Balto shakes it off, shakes it free, and instinct kicks in, okay? Shovel, I'm winding up, okay? The raccoon is free. And I know what you're thinking, 11:30, Sunday morning, like, what's going on? I promise Clayton will be back next week, okay? But I'm about to just deliver a blow to this raccoon because I got to defend my house. And so I'm winding up, and my dog decides he wants one final shot at this raccoon. And before I can slow down, my dog's right there. His head is right there in my path. And so I end up hitting my dog in the head with a shovel. And the interesting thing is, like, it dazed him a little bit, and so the raccoon got away. And so in one way, like, I saved my dog's life that night in a weird roundabout way. Took him to the vet. He turned out okay, you guys, all right? Like, he is fine. He's good. His dog's safe. But I just remember in that moment, okay, it takes 3-4 minutes to share that story with you. But this was like a 30-minute ordeal, okay? Of me, my adrenaline is just pumping, my heart pumping, and I went back, I sat down beside my wife, and she's just watching the whole thing. She just was standing there watching. I don't know what she's doing in this moment. She's just watching this all unfold. And I just looked over and I'm like, man, I am exhausted. I am spent. I'm like, that raccoon about had me, right? I felt outmatched by this raccoon. And Thursday, I talked to my wife. I said, I think I'm going to open the message with my raccoon story. And she just looked at me. She said, well, which raccoon story? And I was like, we laughed back and forth about it. It was like, we have a lot of weird run-ins with these raccoons. I don't know what it was. But I remember looking at her in this moment thinking, that raccoon about had me. I was outmatched. I was unprepared. Have you ever felt like life had you outmatched? You ever felt like life had you outmatched? See, maybe you walked in these doors this morning and you know the sort of father that your family requires. You know the sort of mother your family desires to have, and you wonder to yourself, I don't know if I have what it takes. You walked in these doors maybe feeling a little bit like you're running on fumes. The tank is on empty, and you're asking yourself, do I have what it takes to be the mother or the father that's needed? Or maybe your body is literally crying out right now, and it feels anxious, worried, afraid. Your body's crying out, stop, slow down. You wonder, do you have what it takes? Or maybe you walked in this morning and there's this very real tension internally that you're facing. It's like, I know God has a plan for my future. He has a calling for me. He has all these great things for me, but I see who I am right now. And it feels like there's this giant gap. And I don't know if I'll ever be able to close that gap between who I am and who God has called me to be. And you're wrestling that out right now, maybe this morning. Or maybe you walked in and literally, I just get this picture of life keeps hurling weights at you. Weight after weight, trial after trial. Maybe it's a transition from an old job to a new job. Maybe it's the end of a relationship, a best friend, or maybe kids going off to college, or kids unwanted maybe coming back from college. And it's like life just keeps throwing you weight after weight after weight. And you're like, how do I manage all of this? I can't keep carrying it. See, we all know in this room, life requires a great deal of strength. If you're going to make it through life, you're going to have to get stronger, right? It requires a ton of strength. And I just simply ask you this morning, where do you go for strength? Where do you get your strength? Where do you go to get your strength? And if you're anything like me, sometimes you find yourself going to the wrong places for strength. See, in hopes to deal with some of the complexities of life and the trials in life, oftentimes we just go to the wrong source for strength. And what I'll say to you is, like, out there, this world that we live in today, it's a cultural wasteland out there. It's a secular wasteland out there. It's a desert. It's an arid place. You see, what we do so many times is we go out there hoping to find some sort of life source. And we go out there and yet again we're kind of taken back and, yet again it's just another mirage. I thought maybe it would offer me some sort of nourishment, some sort of strength, some sort of water that I could drink from, but yet again, it's just another mirage. It doesn't deliver the strength we had hoped it would. Where do you go for strength? What life source are you drawing from? It's time, and here's just kind of my heart or the burden behind this message is this. It's time for the church to stop going out to the desert in hopes of finding water. It's time for the church to stop going out to this wasteland hoping to find some sort of nourishment for our soul, the nourishment our soul longs for. We have to go to a different source. Jeremiah 17, 7-8 would put it this way. The prophet says, "But blessed is the one who trusts in the Lord, whose confidence is in him. They will be like a tree planted by the water that sends out its roots by the stream. It does not fear when heat comes. Its leaves are always green. It has no worries in a year of drought. It never fails to bear fruit." This is the flourishing life. You see that deep roots, fruit, drought-proof, living water. This is the good stuff. This is the good life. And I got this picture here that I want to show you. Now, all week, I'm like, man, I fell in love with this picture, and this is a great illustration. But I was like, all week, I'm like, I got to practice the name of this place, all right? This is a picture from the national park called Gan Hashlasha, okay? I didn't just make that name up. It's real, all right? Gan Hashlasha. And a lot of people believe, as kind of rabbinic tradition, Jewish tradition, that this was in fact the Garden of Eden, okay? But what I want you to see is, as you look at this picture, I want you to look out into the distance. See, out in the distance, there's a lot of shrubs. It's pretty barren out there in the distance. Great, beautiful sunset, but out in the distance, pretty barren. But if you look at the center of this photo, it's hard to get past this beautiful body of water. And you see this beautiful body of water. Everything around the water is flourishing. Everything around the water is doing well. But the interesting thing about this body of water is it's not dependent on rainfall. It's not dependent on any sort of river that runs through it. It's fed by this underground spring. This underground spring that is infinite source of water. And because of that spring, everything around this body of water is flourishing and growing and healthy. See, this garden flourishes due to its proximity to the underground spring. This garden flourishes because it has infinite water and an infinite source. This right here is what your life could look like. This is the life that God desires you to have. And the good news is this: if you walked in these doors this morning feeling unempty, feeling weary, feeling burnout, feeling like life is just too great a weight for you to bear, the good news is all you have to do is change your proximity. You just have to change your proximity and get to the life source. How do you do that? How do you do that? Well, this is the whole goal of the message this morning. The whole goal is simple. I want you to leave this room knowing exactly what to do. The goal is every single one of us has to get to the secret place. You have to get to the secret place. The whole goal of this talk is I want to persuade you that one of the most important things you do day in and day out is you getting to the secret place. You have to get to the secret place. When you walk out of these doors, there's going to be one phrase that is burned into your brain. It is, get to the secret place. Why do we got to get there? Because Jesus got there. Jesus got to the secret place. Luke 4, this interesting kind of passage, this interesting chapter. But Jesus, what he's doing, he's in the synagogue. He's teaching. It's Sabbath day, he's teaching in the synagogue. And after he's done teaching, he walks out, and there's a demon-possessed man. He casts out the demon. And then he runs into somebody with an illness. He heals him of his illness. And then he decides, you know what? I'm a little hungry. I'm going to go over to Simon's house for a little brunch, a little Saturday brunch, okay? Brunch is a great, wonderful thing. I love me some brunch. Jesus, he loved brunch too. Went over to Simon's house. When he gets to Simon's house, Simon says, hey, Jesus, actually my mother-in-law is sick as well, has a high fever. Could you heal her too, please? Now, depending on your relationship with your mother-in-law, maybe you want Jesus to come to your house, maybe you don't, if you catch my drift. But Jesus shows up, heals Simon's mother-in-law, has a little brunch, and then he's back at it. He hits the streets again. He's out casting demons out of people, healing people. This is like a wild Saturday. Like if you read Luke 4, it just seems like this is just a normal day to Jesus. Out there just crushing it for the kingdom. Out there doing his Father's work, man. I took my kids to the park yesterday, but Jesus is out here crushing it. You see, then the next day, look at what Jesus does. The next morning, verse 42, says this: at daybreak, Jesus went out to a solitary place. The people were looking for him, and when they came to where he was, they tried to keep him from leaving them. You see that? A solitary place, a hidden place, a secret place. It's almost as if the pressures of Jesus' ministry, as they increased, he knew, I got to get away. I have to go to this secret place. I have to get to the secret place so I can be with the Father and sustain and carry the weight of this ministry. Jesus withdrew, went to a solitary place. Luke 5, verse 15, again, he heals a man with leprosy. He's out there doing kingdom work, but in verse 15, here's what we read. Yet the news about him spread all the more. So the crowds of people came to hear him and to be healed of their sickness. So people want to hear his teaching. There's a demand on his life. And people want to be healed. But here's the secret sauce, the secret place. But Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed? How did Jesus carry the weight of life and the demand of people? He often withdrew and went to the secret place. How do you carry the weight of your life? How do you deal with the complexities of life? How do you find nourishment? You got to get to the secret place. And I know what you're thinking, because I've thought it too, but that works for Jesus. Jesus does that kind of stuff because he's Jesus. But I'm Chris. Like surely Jesus wouldn't demand that of me. Well, Matthew 6, what does Jesus say? When you pray, go to a closet, close the door, and pray to your Father in secret. Jesus did it. He commands you and I to do it. I'm going to tell you the same thing. You have to get to the secret place. But why? Why do you need to get to the secret place? 5 things if you're taking notes. 5 things. First, God meets his people in the secret place. You know, I don't know where you are this morning. Maybe you're brand new to Christianity. Maybe you've been following Jesus for a while. But when you sit down and you look at your Bible, you feel a little intimidated, right? And you pull one of these numbers. I've been there. I've done it before. It's like you close your eyes, you flip open the pages, and you hope it stops, and then you find yourself in Revelation or like Leviticus or like Ezekiel or something. You're like, God, make this make sense, please. I don't know what this, It can be really, really intimidating. The Bible can be intimidating. Okay? But I just want to make it simple for you this morning. The Bible is God's story of how he relates with his people. You are his people. See, throughout history, God's heart, God's desire is to be with his people. You see that in the Old Testament. You see it in the New Testament. He wants to be with people so much, he sent his one and only Son to dwell and live among us. He wants this relationship with his people. And so what is the Bible? The Bible is this great story of God pursuing his people. You see, in the secret place, we see God wants to meet with you. It's his way of meeting with his people. And in Exodus 30 through 34, beautiful story of Moses meeting God. See, Moses met God in the burning bush. Great moment. But a couple chapters later, Exodus 33, he has this crazy encounter with God where he cries out to God on the mountain. He says, God, show me your glory. When's the last time you cried out to God the Father and said, God, show me your glory? Like Moses is crying out, show me your glory. In essence, he's asking, show me who you are. I want to know you. I want to experience your presence. He cries out to God, and God speaks to him and says, okay, same place, same time, tomorrow, we'll meet. I'll show you who I really am. And Moses, he runs back up there, and he has this wild encounter with God, and God literally does this wild thing. He passes by Moses, hides Moses in the cleft of the rock, and he just proclaims his name. He says, Yahweh, Yahweh. That name meaning the one who is. The one who is. The God who was, is, always will be. The God who is present, the God who is relational, the God that's not just like out there somewhere in the sky, but the God who would literally pass in front of Moses. A relational God. And Moses has this wild encounter, and here's what God says of himself. He says, I am Yahweh, Yahweh, the God who is compassionate, gracious, forgiving, slow to anger. Do you know that God? Do you know that God this morning? See, I think what we do a lot of times as adults is we're just trying to recover from some of the things that happened to us when we were children. And I think what we do is when we're children, we're kind of learning, who mom is and who dad is and who friends are. It's easy to project some of those things on God. See, it's like if you grew up with a father who was really quick to anger, if you grew up with a mom who demanded perfection, if you had a best friend stab you in the back, talk bad about you, if you went to a church and the pastor you felt like took advantage of you and your family, it's really easy to project that onto God and say, oh, if the people of God are like that, if my father was like that, if my mother was like that, then God has to be like that. So when you read this encounter with Moses in God, and you hear things like, oh, God is slow to anger, you're like, how does that make any sense? I'm afraid, and I hear this so much, is like sitting down talking with people, the number one thing. They're like, if I sat in God's presence, what do you feel? What do you think God thinks of you? A lot of them just think God's disappointed with them. God's angry with them. But this isn't what we see in the story between Moses and God. In fact, we see the opposite. We see a God who says, no, I'm always going to be with you. I'm compassionate, gracious, and slow to anger. I want to share one more thing about this. You see, we had youth 2 Wednesday nights ago, and we had this awesome moment. Similar message, and we just said, hey, who wants to encounter God? Who wants to get to know God for who he really is? Okay? And y'all, we had 60 to 70 students pack the front of this stage. And they said, I just want prayer to encounter God for who he really is. And I just want to use that as an illustration to encourage the adults in this room. Is like, we have a next generation coming up that they desire to have an authentic, real encounter with God. So if you have kids in your household, it's like, it starts with you. It starts with you. You have to encounter God, meet with God daily in the secret place so that you can offer and pass down from generation to generation who God is. The God who loves, the one who is compassionate and slow to anger. In the secret place, you meet God for who he really is, not who you project or think him to be. The God you long for is found in the secret place. Second, God restores his people in the secret place. Psalm 32. You may know the story of David. David got off to a rough start, committed a horrible sin, slept with another dude's wife, and then had that guy killed, okay? Yet he's described after a man after God's own heart. You're like, whoa, wild, okay? Surely some sort of restoration had to take place, right? Well, Psalm 32, we're given kind of an inside look of how David recovers from one of the biggest flaws, one of the biggest sins of all time. You see, he cries out to God, he says, blessed is the one who is forgiven. And then later on he says, I tried to conceal my sin. I tried to cover it all up, but it caused my bones to rot. I felt sick to my core. I couldn't hold it back any longer. And so he comes to God in the secret place and he confesses his sin. And it says this in verse 7, you are my hiding place. You are my secret place. You are my shelter. You will protect me from trouble and surround me with songs of deliverance. You know what a song of deliverance is? It's when the Israelites cross the Red Sea and they come out the other side singing a song of deliverance. Some of you need a song of deliverance in your life. You need freedom in your life. You need to get rid of that sin in your life. How do you do it? What is the strategy? The strategy is get to the secret place. The freedom you want, the life that you hope for is found in confession in the secret place. David cries out, search me, God, know my heart, test me, and know my anxious thoughts. See if there's any offensive way in me and lead me in the way everlasting. David, in the secret place, comes before God and says, search me, Father, search me. Next one, God strengthens his people in the secret place. Daniel, I'm going through all the good Bible stories, okay? I'm just like, let's hit all the good Bible stories. They're easy to preach on. Daniel in the lion's den. I just watched the cartoon with my kids yesterday morning, and it's like these little cartoon characters, and it's like Daniel's being thrown into a lion's den, and you're just thinking to yourself like, this is pretty intense for like a kid's cartoon thing. I'm not sure if it happened quite like this, but here's what's going on. See, Daniel was an Israelite picked up from his homeland and transported to another culture. Another culture, meaning they served other gods, other kings, and they had to pray to other gods and other kings. The king sends out this decree and says, if you're going to live here, you're going to have to pray to me. What does Daniel do? He decides to strengthen himself in the secret place. He prays 3 times a day. 3 times a day, he gets alone with God to strengthen himself. And then the king pulls him aside and says, Daniel, if you don't bow to me, you're going to the lion's den. I'm going to feed you to a bunch of lions. How do you, being Daniel, look at the king in that moment and say, you know what? Actually, I serve my God. I'm not bowing my knee to you. How do you make it through and not serve culture? How do you make it in this world today that with all of its heartache, all of its sin, all the confusion, all the things the world has to offer you, how do you find strength to make it through? You have to strengthen yourself in the secret place. Next, God protects his people in the secret place. Psalm 91, whoever dwells in the shelter of the Most High will rest in the shadow of the Almighty. You see those words? Rest. Shadow of the Almighty. Do you need rest this morning? Do you need rest? Does your soul long for rest? It says, whoever dwells in the shelter. That word dwell, literally meaning to tabernacle, to make your home in. Whoever makes their home in the secret place, the shelter of the Most High, will get rest in the shadow of the Almighty. Just picture that for a moment. The diagnosis you just received, the tough relationship that you're struggling to keep in your life, the marital issues that keep surfacing. Man, you got to get to the secret place, because in this secret place you have protection. You literally rest in the shadow of God Almighty. The protection you need is in the secret place. And lastly, God guides his people in the secret place. Senior year of high school, I was really struggling. It seemed like senior year of high school, like everybody had their life figured out, which now looking back at it, like a high school student having their life figured out, I don't know if I believe that. But senior year, I was like, man, I got to figure this stuff out. Everybody else was going off to college, knew what they were going to do. And, you know, I was kind of grasping for a plan. And so I was like, architecture sounds kind of cool. Like, let's do that, like, why not? And so I signed up, went to school, had my roommate picked, everything. One of my best friends from high school. And everything was in place. But I worked at Subway. Okay, Subway. I was what you call a sandwich artist, okay? I had a little name badge that said Sandwich Artist Chris. And, man, I to the best of my abilities, man, I made those subs. Like, I was into it at the time. But I remember closing up 11:30 at night, walking out to my car, and I was just like, man, something about life is just off. Felt like I was being disobedient. I felt like there was more to life than what I was experiencing. And I just had this moment of like, what am I going to do? Like a fork in the road of like, what are you going to do? And I just remember God speaking to me so clearly, said, Chris, you're being disobedient. You're running from the call I've placed on your life. See, I was working so hard to just make it look good on the outside. I was working so hard to just kind of put a bunch of plans together so I felt secure. But in this one moment, in my car, Subway parking lot, 11:30 at night, it just felt like God broke through all of that. The stress, the worry, the anxiety, all of it just broke right through it to my heart and said, you need to come back over here. You're off course. You need to come back over here. And what took me months to figure out, in 30 seconds, God just whispered to my heart. See, the guidance you need in life is found in the secret place. And there in that Subway parking lot, in that 1999 green Chevy Tahoe, that became a secret place. Maybe you're here and you're like, all this talk about a secret place, like tell me what the secret place is. This secret place is your encounter with Jesus. It's where you encounter Jesus. And you need to make a daily rhythm of meeting with Jesus in this secret place. How do you do this? As we wrap up this morning, how do you get access to the secret place? It's very simple. You have to remain in him. Remain in Jesus. Be connected to Jesus. Jesus puts it this way. He paints this great illustration. He says, my Father, he owns this vineyard. He says, my Father walks the vineyard and he trims up, he prunes up all the vines. And the goal is when you come across this vine that's not bearing a lot of fruit, you got to prune it up so it bears more fruit. And the vines that don't bear any fruit at all, you got to cut them off. He tends to the vine. He says, you, my disciples, followers of Jesus, you are the branches. And you have to remain connected to the main vine, which is Jesus. So growing up in Michigan, we have this beautiful time of year called fall. Do you guys, anybody know what fall is here in Texas? I love Texas, been here for 10, 11 years now. But man, fall in Michigan is beautiful, beautiful. And one of my favorite things to do in the fall in Michigan is you go to an apple orchard. You go to an apple orchard, all the leaves are changing color, and man, you got a hot, fresh donut, brown sugar cinnamon donut, like in one hand. The other hand, you got hot apple cider, man. And you're just like, you're walking rows of trees, crisp air just swirling around. And you know, like the Michigan Wolverines are about to play football later that afternoon. And you're just like, it's going to be a glorious Saturday, you know? Like, I'm just thinking about it. I'm so excited. But as you walk through this orchard, you notice there are people gathered around some trees, but then there are other trees no one's around. No one's around the withered, dying tree. Has no apple to pick. No, you see crowds forming around the trees where it's like, oh, there's some good fruit. There are apples. There's abundance, right? That's where people go. You see, the whole goal, the whole purpose of the secret place is to be to remain, to stay connected to the main vine, which is Jesus, so that you can bear fruit for other people. Why do you exist? What is your purpose? Your purpose is to live in relationship with God so that you can produce fruit. That is the vision. That is what it means to flourish. That is the vision of what it means to be a follower of Jesus. And he goes on in verse 6 of this whole illustration. He says, if you don't remain in me, if you don't stay connected, you can do nothing. You'll shrivel up, you will die. And that branch will be cut off and thrown aside, cast in the fire. And what he's saying is this. He's saying, you can't take a branch from a vineyard and go build a home with it. You can't. It's like the purpose of it isn't that. The purpose, its only purpose is to bear fruit. Its sole purpose is to bear fruit. Your purpose this morning is to bear fruit, to flourish for the sake of other people. And the only way you do that is through the secret place. You have to schedule time, set up a meeting with God your Father, be alone with him in secret so he can transform your heart, transform your life. Let's pray.